მოგესალმებით ყველას. Hello everyone. თიქო როგორ გიკითხოთ ხომხარ კარგად?
ირაკლი, გამარჯობა.
გაგიმარჯვებთ.
მადლობა. შემოგვიერთდი. მოგესალმებით ყველას.
მოგესალმებით. მოგესალმებით ყველას. უკაცრავად ქართულ ენაზე ვერ მოვისმენთ, თუ ეხლა გრობთავ მარტო გერმანული და ინგლისური გამოაქვს.
გამარჯობა, ანა. გერმანული უნდა მონიშნოთ, იმიტომ რომ ქართული ეს
გერმანული უნდა მოვნიშნო, ხო? მადლობთ.
Should we start soon or? Yeah, okay. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Is that all right?
People
We
are
wait.
joining actively,
Oh, okay.
so let's wait for 2 minutes if
2
that's
minutes.
okay. Everybody.
Sounds good. Just let me know.
Tiffany, I think we can start. Okay.
Tiffany, you're muted.
Of course I am. Sorry. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Urban Talks webinar. It's called Unlocking Green Tech Potential. a gender inclusive perspective. And today's event is hosted by UNDP. And we're so glad that you've joined us today on this Thursday. My name is Tiffany Sprague. I'm the coordinator of UNDP's STEM for All platform and the Just Transition platform, and your moderator for today's event. I think we all kind of know the Zoom drill already, but if you can kindly just keep your self muted unless you have something to say. Please put all questions or comments in the chat box as we're going through the event. This is also being recorded, so if you have any objection to that, let us know now. But it will help so we can put it online for those of us that could not join today. And also want to remind you that it is being translated. So if you see the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen, you can hear it in Georgian as well. So today, what are we doing today? We're exploring a great question. Why does gender matter in the green economy? And even more importantly, how can inclusive approaches help both equity and innovation as we transition to a greener future? Now, before we dive into this conversation, I wanted to just kick off the event with one question. What do you think drives innovation? Do you think it's technology? Do you think it's the promise of profit? Or is it something more human, like our lived experiences, our needs, our visions, or a better life? I mean, I would say it's all these things. But to ground this conversation, I wanted to share just a really quick story before we start. So not long ago, I moderated a webinar on women's role in carbon trading. And one of the speakers was a woman leading renewable energy initiatives in Nepal. It's an area deeply affected by climate change, facing water shortages, frequent droughts. She grew up without reliable electricity. She's telling us her story that she was unable to study at night when the lights went out. And today she's implementing clean energy projects that reduce the time that women and children spend collecting water and firewood. And her work has improving health outcomes by replacing smoke-heavy cooking methods with clean alternatives. And it's transforming how communities use micro hydropower to power their lives. And that's what innovation looks like when it's shaped with these lived experiences, these perspectives. And yet, despite their insights, women like her still face barriers, especially when it comes to accessing capital, recognition, or leadership roles in green tech. So the question that we're going to try to unpack today is, what are we missing out when we exclude these voices from innovation, from the innovation ecosystems? So that's today we're going to explore together with data, with real stories, and forward-looking ideas. And before we get started, I wanted to welcome the project manager in Georgia for Mayors for Economic Growth, Tiko Tikshelashvili, to tell us a little bit about the Mayors for Economic Growth program.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, colleagues. Good afternoon. I'm pleased to welcome you all. And I would like to briefly present what was discussion and like thinking behind planning this event, and what brought us here basically to together with colleagues. So many of you know EU UNDP initiative Mayors for Economic Growth, and throughout the past 4 years, we have been working closely with cities across the Eastern Partnership countries to help them explore new pathways for economic growth, and also to support them in becoming thriving, sustainable, resilient, and future-ready cities, which protects both people and the environment. And together with our local partners, we have been piloting new approaches and trying to address economic challenges, but also climate challenges. And we have witnessed that many of our localities, communities, and cities authorities remain unprepared when it comes to growing risk of climate-induced disasters, unfortunately, which is quite common in our countries. And we had a very good also understanding that having new technologies built in early warning and early response systems would probably save more lives or even avoid the effects of these developments. On the other hand, when we look at local economies, for instance, in Georgia, circular economy rate stands at 1.3%, which is quite far below the European average, 11.5%. And it shows that there is a huge gap in our transition process to resource effective, efficient economies. And it also demonstrates that we are highly dependent on traditional models of production and consumption. So, and what we saw that cities were quite overwhelmed with all these urban challenges, and this need for new and innovative solutions emerged in all these discussions. And we had an opportunity through experience sharing and learning events to be inspired by cities who are already quite successfully adopting innovative approaches and basically adopting green technologies in their work and have amazing results. And we thought that would be great that if our cities would explore more in that direction, but for that they need collaboration with various sectors and especially innovation sector. For instance, in circularity map for Georgia, the very bold vision is set like that. By 2050, circularity societies need to adopt circularity in their everyday lives. And this roadmap emphasized that innovation is the cornerstone for this process, for this transition, for green and just transition. Like having all these challenges in front of us brought us to talk to different players, and we engage with local startup ecosystem. And this discussion revealed that there is like huge potential, but largely untapped in terms of green technology. And there is a talent and there is expertise already, but it needs to be, green technologies need to be further promoted. And I think everybody can do that from their end, whether it's city authority, it's a local community living in remote area, or it's a city residents who are concerned with their environment. It is within this context and driven with these priorities, we teamed up, M4EG Georgia teamed up with our colleagues at IRH, UNDP Istanbul Regional Hub, our gender colleagues, and we saw another huge gap that, it's gender inclusivity is also overlooked when we talk about new technologies, especially green technologies. And therefore, we decided to organize this discussion with amazing speakers. Tiffany will present them pretty soon. And I hope that this will create, as all the other urban talks previously, create a space for exchange of ideas, experiences, and will help us to cooperate more closely, because I'm sure that all cities are facing more or less similar challenges, and we need to find solutions that are promising, that are replicable, and that are effective. This is what is our goal also today, to talk about those solutions and be solution oriented when we talk about sustainable development and future. Thank you very much, and look forward to this amazing discussion today. Over to you, Tiffany.
Thank you, Tico. Thank you for those words and giving us the context of why we are having this discussion, this very important discussion today. So without further ado, I'm going to just tell you what we're going to be doing today in the agenda. We have, as Tico mentioned, we have 4 amazing speakers. We're going to first start with Siti Paul. She's a senior policy researcher and has expertise in artificial intelligence and the labor markets, and she's going to help give us the context of why gender matters in the green economy. And then second, we are going to have Andrew Roble from the Chief Reinvention. He's the Chief Reinvention Officer, Reinvantage, and he's going to be going through what are the top global trends in green tech. So we have these 2. We're kind of zooming out, looking at the context, and then we're going to dive deeper into some more local insights. We're going to go into Georgia, and we're going to have our colleague Anna Lobajanitsa, who's going to talk about a study that we're doing on women, STEM, and green jobs. And then we're going to end with Nato Chakvatadze, who's a lecturer at the Ilia State University, and she's going to talk about startup ecosystems in Georgia. So we have a packed agenda, so buckle up. We're going to have a good time. I'm going to first welcome Siti Paul then to the stage. Please.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for that incredibly kind introduction. And thank you, Tico, for setting up the stage for this conversation so well. You've already emphasized a lot about what is the interplay between tech and green economies. And I think that's where a lot of my background for the conversation today is going to come from. As Tiffany mentioned, I'm a researcher at Interface, where I research AI and labor markets, and with a specific gender lens. So we look at the gender gap in the AI talent pool, and a lot of the principles that we've studied there also apply to the gender gap in the green economy. So trying to see how, from the labor and talent perspective, we can look at bridging some of these gender gaps. I hope you all can see my screen. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So starting with some basic statistics here, we see that the green economy is growing in size. There are more and more people being employed in this space by the years. We see as of 2023, there were already like 16.2 million people globally employed in the renewable energy space. There have been recent additions.
Sorry, we cannot see your screen. Can you please share it again?
Oh, sorry. I'm gonna try again. Can you see it
Yes,
now?
now we can.
Perfect. You missed my introduction slide, so that's that. And coming to slide number 2, which is where I was reading the statistics from. So I mentioned there are 16.2 million people in the green economy space as of 2023. So clearly would have grown in the last 2 years. And there's been growing solar capacity in Europe, but what I think is the gap here is that the green economy has changed. Today's clean energy requires smart grids that optimizes power distribution in real time. There's need for AI systems that can predict equipment failures before they happen. There's demand of IoT sensors to monitor energy consumption. So essentially, there's a big interplay of tech, AI in the energy space, but 4 out of 10 adults in Europe don't have basic digital skills needed for the green transition. So we're talking here about building digital infrastructure for the green economy, but we are not building the digital workforce to actually run it. And that is slowing down everything that is needed for this green transition. Sorry, I'm right. Right. So today I'm going to focus on 5 critical gender gaps in this tech and green economy space. The first one is skills, the access to training for emerging green jobs. The second one is the gender gap in accessing employment opportunities. Third, I'm going to briefly talk about finance. then leadership, and then talk about the innovation side. So I'm going to dive right in and move on to skills. So we find that the green economy is increasingly dependent on digital technologies. As mentioned, there's need for data analytics, but we see that women comprise of only 22% of the global AI workforce. This number is based on how we define digital skills and AI skills, which is fairly broad. Right now, the global AI skill taxonomy includes AI literacy. It includes people who might be able to use, for example, ChatGPT in their day-to-day jobs, not necessarily the people actually building these technologies or being able to manage these technologies essentially. So if you look at those numbers, they are much, much lower than this 22%. And then we see that even in terms of the pipeline, right? For example, in Kazakhstan, as of 2022, only 10% of the students studying in energy programs were women. So when we look at the pipeline, there are much fewer women in STEM fields interested or like feeding into these industries. And then there is the big problem of the leaky pipeline, because a lot more women enter these tech and green industries, but then leave after 2 to 3 years. Because when you see at the entry level, in Europe, the average is 30.7% women in the AI talent pool. And then as you move up the ladder in seniority, it's fewer and fewer. 13.6 is the average. We see some of the bigger economies, it's even lower. The average, I think, is brought up a lot by Finland, where we see 40.1% in leadership positions. But generally, they are around 9 to 11% women in senior leadership positions in these spaces. We see that 59% of all workers will need retraining by 2030 in digital skills to be able to meet the targets that have been set up by global economies. So we really cannot afford to lose women and female talent along the way. Talking about the second gap, which is job access. So we see, okay, then there are women entering the workforce, but then when it comes to accessibility to these jobs, there are 15% women in the global energy workforce at the moment. Most of them occupy low-skilled positions even within this industry. There are only 16% in management and 19% in technical roles. So we're seeing the percentage growing slower and like lower and lower as you see more technical positions, as you see more senior positions. So even when there are women in the industry, who is making all the decisions, right? When you talk about, like Tiffany, you mentioned initially this example of this woman in Nepal, the consequences of climate change are very differently felt by different populations. There's research to show that women and children are more impacted by climate change. So their lived experiences are very different. Unless there are diverse populations building these technologies, their perspectives don't get encoded in these technologies, and these technologies are not being built to solve the problems being faced by them, and in some ways are amplifying the problems. Right now, when you look at facial recognition technologies, they don't work equally well for all populations. And these are technologies that are already being employed by not just private companies, also by governments across the globe. There was this case of, I think it was the Portuguese government, where it was being employed at the border by the government, and it was identifying women as less trustworthy because their faces expressed more emotion. And according to the data being fed into the technology, more emotion meant less trustworthy. So there have been so many examples where we find that what we are building is not being built for everyone, and probably because it's not being built by everyone. So that is where job access and then also having diversity in teams really plays a big role. And a lot of these barriers, like I mentioned, there are very few women even studying right now to in the future occupy these positions. A lot of this has to do with stereotypes around working in the energy sector, which is perceived to be a more male-centric center, essentially. So there needs to be a lot of debunking there. Talking about the next gap, which is in finance, I think there are so many statistics by reports from all kinds of sources that show that female scientists are struggling with grant funding. I think the statistic is less than 0.2% of the global funding goes to women, which is, I mean, I don't even need to emphasize how small that is. There are a lot of funding barriers. There's a lot of financial literacy divide there for green financing options. And there is a business case for this, right? We know that it's not just unfair. We don't need to emphasize how unfair this inequality is, but it is also economically wasteful. We've seen from the example of Indonesia that increasing women's labor participation by just 25% could boost their GDP by 2.9% in a year. So we're, again, leaving money on the table here. The next one, I've already touched upon this briefly, is the leadership representation. This is where we see some regional bright spots. We see that Armenia, Georgia, and Kazakhstan lead Central Asia in overall gender participation, with Georgia being at 71 gender parity, with Georgia being at 71.6%. But then here again, we have to look at the seniority and what does this look like? Finland, like I mentioned, is 41% women in senior executive AI roles, which is the highest we've seen. Milan is an interesting case study that we are doing right now because it's the most gender balanced city in Europe, with 31.7% women in AI positions. So as a country, it's Finland. As a city, it's Milan. So we see this as we're right now in the process of doing more qualitative research on these countries and regions to see what are the policies that are working, what is it that makes these AI hubs more gender equal than others. Next up, I wanted to talk about innovation participation. We see two benefits here, two innovation benefits. Firstly, gender responsive green technologies, like I mentioned. Who builds the product really impacts what type of products being built and what types of solutions the product comes up with, what type of problems are being tackled. And then, of course, there's, again, the business case for inclusive hiring. Diverse teams perform better. Diverse teams come up with more inclusive solutions. Diverse teams have shown to bring companies more money. So there's a lot of data that pushes for more diverse teams. I'm going to just go to the next pointer. I've made a lot of business cases because I feel like you talk about equity in a lot of different ways, but this is the one that hits the spot usually when people realize, yes, think there are a lot of values-based arguments here, but also just knowing it just doesn't make sense to not do it, even financially, even economically, even as a society. So here we are, 2024 was the hottest year on record. That's an urgent call for action. We need more people working in green economies, and we're missing out on more than half of the talent pool by not working on bringing more women into green tech, bringing more women into green industries. There's economic impact. In having gender equity in this workforce is going to make the green transition much faster and also cheaper for countries. There's the innovation multiplier. Diverse teams generate more green innovation. And of course, we've seen that these are the skills in demand. These are the skills of the future. Need for AI skills have increased 5 times since 2015. So we need to be retraining people anyways, and it's going to actually broaden the gender pay gap. It's going to broaden the gender gap in the workforce more broadly if women are not more urgently trained to join the jobs of the future, essentially. So the call to action I have is simple: address skill gaps through targeted retraining. First, also know what the gender gap looks like, right? There are even like allies feel like, yes, we know there aren't enough women, but do you know how urgent it is? What is it? What is being done in this space? What do the exact numbers look like? What does the impact of that look like? So I feel like there's need for more data in the space, and there's need for more understanding of what does this ecosystem look like to actually understand the urgency of it. That also helps with redesigning career pathways. Like one of the recent papers that I've worked on has been to come up with a more nuanced understanding of the level of technicalities needed within the AI workforce, which means that if there's someone who's already a data scientist, maybe it's easier to retrain that person into becoming an AI engineer rather than doing blanket AI skilling programs, which more often than not are missing the spot. And the last call to action I had was I think I pretty much covered it. I was talking about building evidence, addressing these skill gaps, and knowing what we are working with to start with. And I will leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Siddhi, for all this great information and the data. And sharing your expertise with us. I mean, I think we all know how urgent it is. In fact, I just read the EU STEM Coalition put out a LinkedIn post just 3 hours ago saying that Europe is short 2 million STEM professionals and the gap is growing. And so there's a huge, labor shortages. And then given the statistics that you showed us, by supporting women and changing, I think, which is at the root of it all, is social norms and occupational segregation and what we think of as, who belongs in STEM. If we can change that, then maybe that will help out the labor shortage as well. So it's not like you said, it's not just a fairness issue. I mean, it is, but it's a climate urgency, it's an emergency, and will help also economic growth. So really, thank you so much for spending your time with us and putting together such a well thought out presentation.
Thank you so much. And just on the labor shortage part, like one of the reports that I'm coming out with later in this month shows that there are double the vacancies as there is available talent in most European nations right now in the AI space. So again, there's a big, big gap there to fill.
Very big gap. And we're only in the AI, the race, for AI technology is going faster than what the people in this supply can fulfill. And it's all about critical raw minerals, and it's just all kind of related. And STEM, I think, these skills are foundational to that. So yes, so I wanted to remind everyone as well to put your questions and comments, reactions in the chat, please. Okay, so now we're going to invite Andrew Roble. He's going to give us more of a zooming out and what are the global trends? Like what's the status of the trends in green tech? What should we be keeping a look for? Please, Andrew, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. It's great to be here, and thanks for having me. And yes, I'm going to share some trends, but I'm also going to pose some questions, which are inevitable and sometimes not really looked at. So let me actually start with a sentence that might sound a little uncomfortable at first. We are not preparing for green transformation. We are already being shaped by green transformation, whether we are in Tashkent or Lviv or Pristina or Tbilisi. We are no longer simply responding to climate challenges. We are navigating a new system of constraints. But the good news is that it's also a new canvas of opportunity. I've spent the past few years tracking how systems change and how disruptions impact them. And I've learned that the green shift doesn't begin with policy or capital. It begins with the questions we ask before we act. So today, I want to share 5 signals or maybe I should call them clues. And these signals reflect not just what's happening around, but what we need to notice if we really want to lead with relevance. So let me start with the first signal. So we often talk about closing the digital divide, but quietly another chasm has opened, and in many places it's already very wide, and it's the green divide. Across the region, capital cities are testing EV buses, building smart waste platforms, or launching circular economy projects. But just a few hours away, rural areas still burn coal, dump waste in riverbeds, and rely on diesel generators to keep the lights on. We talk about net zero, green jobs, and smart cities. Even today, we are talking about, this is urban talks. But what if we are actually building a future that only some of us can access? So this is my first question, because here's the overlooked truth. Rural zones grow our food, protect our biodiversity, and generate most of our renewable energy. And yet they are treated as backward. They're completely disconnected, waiting to be modernized. So what if we actually focused on rural areas, not just as recipients of green tech, but designers of it? If we look at Central Asia and Eastern Europe, rural women, run farms and teach sustainability in classrooms. But when funding flows and decisions are made, they're rarely in the room. This isn't about inclusion. It's about capacity. It's about competitiveness and coherence, to sort of alluding to what has been said already. Green tech can be a unifier, but only if it's designed for where data is missing. We have plenty of data in cities. Infrastructure is fragile. That infrastructure is quite fragile in rural areas, and leadership looks different. Because if we continue designing only for urban centers, only for where the dashboards are, glowing and the headlines are clean, we risk reinforcing the very divisions we claim to be solving. So let me ask my first big question. What if we have built our green future on the wrong center, and it's time to redraw the map? Now, I'm going to go to signal number 2. I'm going to leave some time for you to also think about the questions, and perhaps we can continue with the questions later. So signal number 2, from food scraps to fashion offcuts, waste isn't the end of the line. It's actually the beginning of a different system. And we have fantastic examples of that. In Moldova, a startup grows packaging from mushroom roots. In Estonia, we have a startup that replaces waste wool, or waste wool actually replaces plastic bubble wraps and paper envelopes. In Ukraine, we have a startup that produces paper made from fallen trees. Here's the shift. Waste is no longer waste. It's actually untapped input. It's raw material for what I call reinvention. The most promising green ventures in the region don't treat waste as disposal. They treat it as design, as opportunity, as the start of something better. But we can't keep calling these solutions alternatives or pilots, because and we actually can't keep treating circularity as something that belongs on the fridge, which is what is happening right now. Scaling this thinking means shifting procurement. It means unlocking data access. It means thinking beyond the capital, and I mean the capital city, and thinking beyond the old, or beyond the things that we already know. I mentioned that Ukrainian startup, they probably spend as much energy educating buyers as they do producing high quality paper. So the barrier isn't quality, it's actually the mindset. So my big question number 2 is, what if there are other areas in green tech, just like waste, that we fail to see as potential? All right, that leaves us with, that gives us time for signal number 3. The energy transition is often talked about like a race the region is trying to catch up with. But maybe we need to stop chasing and start choosing where we can lead. Because globally, some striking shifts are actually underway. So energy is decentralizing, grids are being redesigned, and countries are waking up to the idea that clean energy isn't just about carbon. It's about control, it's about resilience and local opportunity. And here's where it gets really interesting. In much of the world, outdated grid infrastructure is holding progress back. But in the region, many systems are still being built or rebuilt, like in Ukraine, for example. That's not a disadvantage. It's actually a chance to leapfrog legacy, to design for flexibility. Storage, another thing, is becoming central. The question is no longer how we produce energy, but how we manage energy, how we store it, and how we share it. There's room here for new players to specialize, for startups, for industrial partnerships, for smaller countries to shape that pace. Even industrial policy is changing. Big economies are investing in renewables and clean tech manufacturing, but there is space for others to lead in smart integration, in niche solutions, or in local innovations that provide scale. And decentralization, well, this is the language in the region already. We have examples like off-grid in Central Asia, solar rooftops in war-hit Ukraine or Ukrainian cities, community-owned models in Moldova. The real opportunity isn't just technical; it is actually structural and it's strategic. It's about building systems that match who we are, not just where we want to go. So maybe the transition we keep fearing is actually the one we're most ready for. So my question number 3, what if this region isn't late for the transition, but early to a different kind of future? Now, signal number 4. There is no energy transition without a skills transition, and that has already been mentioned as well. And right now, we're training for a world that's already gone. Most green jobs demand digital fluency, systems thinking, and adaptability. And many of our educational institutions still divide disciplines like it's 1983. No solar future without installers. No green mobility without EV technicians. No smart waste without AI interpreters and real-time analysts. Yet, we still produce graduates who are job-ready in theory, but actually future-blind in practice. If we want the green energy, we must reinvent education. Let's stop rewarding memorization. Let's start cultivating problem solvers. Because the hardest part isn't really teaching new skills. It's letting go of old models that no longer work. So my question number 4 is, what if in failing to empower young people today, we're already defining their limits tomorrow? And finally, signal number 5. Green tech doesn't fail for lack of ideas. It fails for lack of visibility, clarity, and courage. Also, we've been talking about women. I think that courage should also be bigger when it comes to women. So too often I would say policy is also something that plays really safe. It's mainly focused on compliance, not really on direction. But stories is what moves systems, and silence really leaves a vacuum. If we don't shape a story of our green transition clearly, ambitiously, and publicly, someone else will write it for us. And leadership here isn't really about releasing another strategy PDF for 2030 or 2050. It's about shifting incentives, scaling what works already, and backing the brave. It's about telling the story not of polished success, but of reinvention in motion, not of the center alone, but more importantly, of the edges. When we amplify only the capital cities, we silence the quiet breakthroughs. When we hide the struggle, we lose the momentum. So my final fifth question is, what if we have mistaken strategy for vision and silence for stability? All right. So where does this leave us? It leaves us really with one truth. Green tech is not really a sector. It's a shift. It's not just about energy or waste or mobility. It is really about systems and who gets to shape them. The future of green in this region will be shaped in Tbilisi, in Chisinau, in Astana, in Yerevan. It will be shaped in classrooms, in startups, in labs, and in all the quiet spaces where the old ways no longer make sense and where we are able to admit that. It's not just an energy transition, but it's actually a reinvention invitation. And maybe the real work starts when we begin to ask, what if we're not just solving problems, but rewriting the questions or asking better or different questions? And it's no longer about if we will respond, but about how brave we are when we actually do respond. Thank you very much for that. I hope I posed quite a few questions and given some food for thought as well.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. You've given us a lot to think about.
Process.
Sorry?
To process.
Yeah, and to process and help us shift our way of thinking. I mean, some things that bubbled up for me. I like that waste is an untapped input. The main barrier really is mindset. I totally agree with that. And then this idea that we need to reshape our education curriculum to kind of be fit for purpose, to make sure that we are training the workforce to be able to take on these new jobs, or, you know, to tackle the urgent challenges that we're up against in climate. That policy needs to not just be about compliance and also just, you know, shaping the direction. And I love the idea of like listening to the quiet spaces in the rural areas and participate in making them leaders and not in also like in what we're talking about today, women. I mean, women are often sidelined, and to also be able to include them into shaping and leading this green transition. There is a comment. Yeah, go ahead.
If I can add one thing, you know, we're all about, and myself included, sort of stuck with our way of thinking always. But what I would encourage everyone to do would be to ask yourself or myself, you know, am I thinking the right way? Is there a different perspective? Maybe, you know, I'm not asking the right question, because that's where the shift starts.
For sure. And I think that's the challenge is to get people to be able to even think about, you know, questioning themselves or challenging themselves. And that's, I think people here probably in this webinar are able to do that, but those in power might, you know, have some convincing to do to be able to yeah, change the way that they're thinking. There is a lot actually of feedback in the chat that I wanted to mention, but I think it's in Georgian, so I might not be able to read that. Here it says, to transform waste into a resource, it is essential to accelerate the implementation of separate waste collection across the regions. So that's a comment. I don't know if you want to.
every single way of looking at things that have not been utilized is a great way to start. So completely agree with that.
Yeah. Excellent. And then, yeah, feel free to respond to, maybe there's some things in Georgian that I'm overlooking, but I think we can get some translation from our support here. But thank you again, Andrew, and we'll come back to you for more Q&A.
Thank you.
Because I think, at least for me, I'm processing a lot of things that you posed to us. Okay, so this is actually a good segue in talking about rural areas. How can we leverage this untapped talent and potential that we have for successful green just transition? I'm going to welcome Anna, our UNDP Georgia colleague, to the floor. And here,
thank you. Let me just share my presentation. And very interesting speeches and panelists so far. Thank you so much. Can you see my screen on full screen?
Yes.
Okay. Let me. Yep. Okay. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. Today I'll present findings from report exploring how Georgia's green transition intersects with gender equality and STEM education. As Georgia advances towards climate goals and economic reform, it's critical to ensure that the transition is inclusive, equitable, and transformative, particularly for women and girls. Before diving into the findings, let me start with the purpose of the study. The study covers 11 countries, as you can see on the screen, offering a regional lens on both shared challenges and country-specific dynamics. In Georgia, as in the wider region, the green transition is creating new economic and social realities, but without gender-responsive planning and investment in STEM and soft skills, we risk reinforcing existing inequalities. The study and report used mixed methodology. We reviewed national policy documents and educational strategies and analyzed labor force survey microdata using OECD's task-based framework. And to capture lived experiences, we conducted key informant interviews with stakeholders across government, CSOs, and industry representatives. We also hosted 5 focus group meetings, and we also collected survey answers to better understand systematic barriers. While the survey sample was not nationally representative, it offered strong directional insights into public perceptions and structural challenges. I think it is really important to understand what is just transition, and the concept of just transition is central to this entire discussion. And I'd like to share the definition that was used within our study. And this is according to ILO. The just transition is concerned with maximizing the social and economic opportunities of climate action while minimizing and carefully managing any challenges related to the impacts on the world of work, including gendered impacts, in an effort to facilitate decent work outcomes, ensuring social dialogue and respect for international labor standards in the process. So this was the definition we have used within the study. As Georgia advances towards green economy, it will rely heavily on sectors like clean energy, sustainable agriculture, green construction, and eco-smart infrastructure. So these sectors don't just require investment, they require people with STEM skills, right? Engineers, IT professionals, designers, and technicians who can drive innovation and resilience. But women are significantly underrepresented in STEM and green jobs, particularly in fields like engineering, ICT, and renewable energy. we looked at Georgia's labor market through the OECD's Green-Brown Jobs framework. And here's what we found. Men are more likely to work in technical, high-emission sectors like construction, infrastructure, that can transition to green jobs. Women, on the other hand, are overrepresented in sectors like food processing and textile, which are less aligned with green growth. And without targeted support, women are at risk of being left behind in this transition. To understand how these disparities emerge, we used the STEM pipeline model, and this framework traces gendered barriers across 4 stages. It is early education, it is skills development, workforce entry, and career and leadership. And each stage is influenced by stereotypes, lack of opportunities, and policy gaps. And our goal was to identify where and how we can intervene effectively. And our goal will be doing so. Many girls in Georgia show early interest and aptitude in science, but by adolescence, this interest often fades. Why? Because of subtle but persistent messages from textbooks, teachers, and even families that STEM is for boys. In rural areas, girls face even greater challenges like fewer resources, limited role models, and cultural expectations. We also found that totally like 100% of educators surveyed said that Georgia's curriculum lacks content on environmental science and sustainability, which is critical for preparing all students, not just girls, for green jobs. For those girls who do persist, university presents new challenges, and ICT and engineering classrooms are still overwhelmingly male-dominated. Women report feeling isolated, lacking mentors, and often face subtle biases. Then comes the workforce. Many struggle to find internships or entry-level jobs. 83% of young job seekers in our study cited lack of entry points as the biggest barrier, and this disproportionately affects women. Even when women enter STEM or green jobs, many leave mid-career. Why? Because workplaces are not designed with women in mind. There's limited support for caregivers, no laws mandate flexible work or paid paternity leave or even maternity leaves when it comes to private companies. Promotion process often favor men, which is connected to cultural perceptions and stereotypes, and the result is that women fall off the leadership ladder and Georgia loses out on top talent at a time when it's desperately needed. Georgia's green transition depends not just on jobs, but also on innovation. Yet women face steep barriers to entrepreneurship and few own property, so it's harder to access loans. For instance, I can give you numbers. Women own only 18% of land in Georgia. And business networks are often male-dominated. And many women are steered towards safe jobs rather than risk-taking ventures. So this means fewer women-led green startups, limiting the country's capacity for climate innovation and inclusive growth. And as we are speaking about urban in this webinar, Georgia moves toward the green economy, as I already mentioned, and sectors like urban planning, construction, infrastructure modernization are at the forefront. So the country's energy efficiency law and the law on energy efficiency on buildings are already reshaping the job market, creating new opportunities in green construction and smart urban services. But here's an issue. These jobs are overwhelmingly occupied by men. largely due to long-standing gender imbalances in engineering and technical fields. And women remain underrepresented, not only in STEM education, but also in the leadership of sectors that shape our cities. This lack of diversity has real-world consequences, and it limits the development of gender-responsive urban solutions like safe public transportation, inclusive housing design, and accessible energy systems. Educators and stakeholders also note that Georgia's education and training systems are not yet aligned with the skills needed for these eco-smart jobs, especially for young women and girls. And finally, while national strategies like National Energy and Climate Plan emphasize sustainability, they often lack explicit gender integration, particularly in the context of infrastructure and city planning. And if you want truly sustainable cities, we must ensure that women are included in designing and building them. So what can be done? The report makes several recommendations that STEM education with hands-on learning and female role models on early stage, provide targeted scholarships and mentorship programs, support women-led green startups with training and financing, make workplaces more inclusive with flexible hours, parental leaves, and transparent promotion paths without discrimination, and most importantly, mainstream gender across all climate and labor policies. For the final thought, Georgia's green transition is about more than meeting emission targets. It's about creating a future that is sustainable, innovative, and inclusive. But we can't get there without women. By investing in gender equality across the STEM pipeline, we unlock talent, we close gaps, and we build resilience. Because as you can see on the slide, green economy can't be built on gender inequality. Thank you so much for your attention. I think I'm on time. And if there will be any questions, I'm happy to answer it. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Anna, for giving us a rundown of this study that we are doing across the region and giving us the details about Georgia. And I can't help but wonder if we are able to implement all the recommendations that are given, like how much more, and how quickly we can, and more quickly that we can accelerate the green and just transition. So thank you for highlighting those and, giving us a picture of what the potential is there. And I'm sure we're gonna come back to some questions. I'm going to move on to Nato to talk more about the startup ecosystem in Georgia. And then after this, we'll have hopefully a rich Q&A. Thank you. Over to you, Nato.
So hello everyone, really very honored to be here with this esteemed audience, and thank you very much for very interesting presentations that previous speakers have done. My speech will be in more Q&A format, so we can proceed with that. But as an introduction, I would like to say that my last 10 decades endeavors are related with technology ecosystem development in not only in Georgia, and I have been doing that through implementing acceleration and incubation programs, working for VCs, and being a founder myself too. So I hope to contribute this discussion from multiple perspectives.
Thank you. Thanks for joining. Yes, so we're going to have about 4 questions, and hopefully we'll stimulate the audience. And please remember to thank you for putting comments and questions in the chat. The first one is, when you look at cities as hubs of green tech, where do you see the greatest untapped potential? I mean, I think we've kind of hit on that in the previous discussions. But untapped potential, not just for breakthrough innovation, but for inclusive innovation that truly reflects the needs and contributions of diverse communities. Like, are you seeing any trends of like what sectors, maybe there's some demographics like in the rural areas, in the regions. What are you seeing these days?
Thank you so much. Very interesting question. And talking about not only Georgian regions, but also broader regional cities and regions and rural areas, there is a lot of potential, and everything has to be done. There are some trends that we can observe, but which are like renewable energy. Georgia has a lot of water and river resources, while Armenia has more solar resource development opportunities. So those trends are there. And also to double click on what my previous speaker has already highlighted, the fashion, greening fashion industry, or food industry, or like wood production industry. Those are pretty much active trends that I observe at this point in time. But there is so much more to do, especially in Azerbaijan. Let's take who is oil oil exporter country. They have a lot of huge space to create more friendly production mechanism solutions to favor environment better. So the regions wise. To kind of double click on inclusion to enable more innovative ecosystem. What needs to be done is to create an ecosystem. When we are talking about entrepreneurship, we add into ecosystem most of the time, because innovation ecosystem development, it cannot be relied on entrepreneurs only. Entrepreneurship is a mindset when you are searching for solving some problems that is existing. And I agree that green tech is not that much an industry, but a shift to what needs to happen in all the sectors, because it is smarter, more sustainable way of doing business or doing economies. But at this point in time, it is very expensive, because it is relied on the shoulders of entrepreneurs themselves. And entrepreneurs individually cannot handle the big challenges which are related to this shift. And what needs to be done is to create an ecosystem to enable local entrepreneurship and innovation development at municipality, city level, which is non-existent at this point in time. Maybe I'll allow you to go with your next question and follow up with what I wanted to say.
Yeah, following on that, what you're saying, what do you think? I mean, we were talking about the rural-urban divides, right? And how can we make rural areas also, these epicenters of innovation and technology? What makes a city conducive? Like, what do we need? What does an area need to be an inclusive, vibrant startup ecosystem? And where do you think maybe cities in Georgia or cities in the region like stand on this spectrum in terms of like the regional rural areas?
Yeah, talking about ecosystem, it is a very complex thing. While entrepreneurs are in the heart of this ecosystem, there are so many layers around. One of them is local municipality policymakers. One of them is local non-profit sector, which is working on developing the awareness informally. And the core thing is here academia, like educational stakeholder, which is bringing key knowledge, doing key researches and developments for local ecosystem to increase their understanding about how to make things more efficient, greener, more sustainable, etc. I am learning a lot of best practices, how innovation ecosystems can be developed, and to observe observe real practice examples. All of the ecosystems that are successful today are built around some strong academias where they have strong academic programs and strong research that is food for local ecosystem to show what they need to do, what they need to execute on, what they need to put into practice. If this stakeholder is non-existent and there is no kind of foundation what you can build further, the ecosystem is chaotic. They do kind of things what they think it is, what they think makes sense, but overall these efforts get wasted because it doesn't add on any foundation. The foundation is not there. Also bringing an example of success ecosystems. In the US cities or European cities that I have experienced on myself, the university is not a place for education only. The university is a place for meeting, a place for development, place for networking, and a place for understanding the mutual needs, what the city has to do. Including inclusion of policymakers, and there is an understanding that not only entrepreneur but a corporation, local policymaker, local expert in some of the industry, they also need to pay back to the university with their existing and available resources, so that together the synergy effects manage to be created and mutual common good was enabled. So this is what we are missing at this point in time, and probably this is something where we need to work more.
Sorry, I mean, yeah, so universities education institutions, and I know there are some in the rural areas, and maybe it's like more investments can go into these institutions to kind of help spur the innovation and ecosystem in the
and when we are talking about smaller rural areas or smaller cities, university is more difficult to have, but at least you can have a strong professional education centers, vocational schools, specialized on industries which is typical for the region or city. This is not something difficult to do, but still we see that this pillar is not working properly.
No, and that's speaking back to what the study that Anna was presenting. The OECD modeling shows that the green jobs are really in the capital cities right now, and I think everyone kind of recognizes that. It's not in the rural areas. And then the green transition is going to impact like job losses more in rural areas. And if the green jobs are in the capital city, and then jobs are going to be, going to be lost in the rural city. I mean, a lot of attention needs to be paid attention, I think, to the rural areas. The next question I had was that you helped launch this green entrepreneurship course at Ilia State University. From your experience, like what are people most excited about in the space? And then maybe what's holding them back?
Thank you for the question. That happened a while ago, kind of several years ago, when together with CSRDG, I introduced the new course like Green Entrepreneurship at Ilia State University, where I've been head of Entrepreneurship Center back in a day. So what inspired me to make it was that when I had an entrepreneurship class, by accident, one of my students brought his friend who apparently was a biology student. And after the class was over, this biology student approached me saying that, oh my gosh, I didn't know that I can realize make my idea real. I'm a biology student. I would never take this class, but now kind of listening it by accident, I know that I can do my business and make the dream of plastic substitution real. So this was inspiration that, oh my gosh, there are general entrepreneurship is not enough, and we need to dig deeper and provide like specialized courses for where other students, other professions also would merge efforts with business students, and they would come up with some interesting solutions together, because we know that, and we acknowledge in business entrepreneurship education that only business students cannot handle any of the challenge because they need expertise in the field. And that was the reason we introduced this green entrepreneurship, which also managed to attract biology and natural sciences students in the class. And it turned out into very interesting collaborations, and they came up with some very interesting solutions about how to reduce waste, how to make wood production more efficient and sustainable, etc. Or some kind of ideas also we had on alternative energy development. That was amazing result, and we continued moving towards the specializations, and also introduced some social entrepreneurship, which is also interlinked with green, etc., etc. But as you mentioned, yes, green jobs are available in cities, but regions and small cities can feed these companies located in central areas with some knowledges and needs which exist in the regions. It is very important for any entrepreneurial initiative to have a scale, and the scale is kind of in case you make sure to understand the needs of everyone, not just in someone who is located in the city. I'm not sure what was another part of your question, but this was a story about green entrepreneurship course.
That's great. And hopefully that this course can get mainstreamed into national curriculum, because I think this is something that's just going to be, it's here, and we need this is part of the retooling or reforming education to be fit for purpose there. Well, thank you, Nato, for sharing your experiences and sharing your insights about the ecosystem. I wanted to now invite all the speakers, and I'm terribly sorry. I just got a note from Citi saying that she had an emergency and had to drop. But I see that there is a question for Citi, and we can share that with her, and then we can get back to you if that's okay. With the next like 10 minutes or so, maybe we can get some questions from the audience. You can either come off the mic. I see that there's some also on the chat. But one question that let's see, I think some of these have already been answered. But one question I had for everyone too is if you could give one piece of advice to a policymaker who wants to unlock more women, like today, because I know there's a lot of like building that we need to do, and it's a long term, it's a long game. But if today you could give a piece of advice to a policymaker who's like, you know what, how can I get more women to lead innovation in green tech? How can I get more women into STEM jobs? Like, what would that be? And I'd be really interested, because you all are coming from very different perspectives, like the private sector and from development practitioner. So maybe we can ask Andrew first, and then Anna, and then Nato.
Well, one of the things that I often say is that if you have been looking at something and applying the same ideas, the same approaches, over a course of time, and you've been getting the same results, maybe it's time to drop all of that altogether and see what hasn't been yet looked at, and try to see what could be done in this area. That would be the first one. Like, get rid of what you have been doing if this is not bringing enough results.
So just taking stock and then reflecting back, and then see where you can
Look, it's all about the mindset. That's how I see it, and I will always go back to that thought, because I see that's the center of practically everything.
Well said. Thank you. Anna, what would be your piece of advice for policymaker today?
Thank you, Tiffany. I'd say partnership with universities or vocational institutions to identify and mentor women in engineering, ICT, or environmental sciences, because during the survey, we identified a huge gap between businesses and private sector and universities. So they don't speak with each other. They don't. They are not aware of needs. What is the demand on the market, and what are the specificities when they hire for this job. So I'd say more partnership with this university and private sector.
Yeah, it goes along with what Nato was saying. Thank you, Anna. And Nato, how about you? What would be your piece of advice?
My piece of advice would be to increase, look over the access to finance policies they have. What is available for women, what is not, and if something is not available, why? Why I'm saying that is that specifically in talking about Georgia, in Georgia, the social tradition is that real estate goes to male kids, and women are not owners of real estate, which is something needed to be bankable. And when you go to have a bank credit for developing your business, you don't have anything to present. So this is one of the issues coming from social traditions, but we cannot change it that urgently. It takes really a while to fix it, but while these traditions are fixed, maybe government policies need to create some ways how to stimulate investing in women more than we have today. But the creation of stimuli is super important. I even have a case that when woman entrepreneur, it happened not long time ago, like 8 years ago, a woman entrepreneur who even owned a house wanted to get a credit for her business, and they asked her to bring someone male to be a collateral too. So this happens. It is not methodology. This is kind of the harsh truths that we have, and the government needs to understand that women have double trouble and hurdles once initiating to have their own businesses. And there are objective reasons. It's not about motivation. Motivation is there. No, it's not about confidence. Women know what to do and they are confident they can do, but they don't have resources to make them real.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So that's well-rounded, and that's what I expected, was to have like reflection on your mindset in this, partnerships, and then, yes, incentives and policy to help stimulate investment. There are some questions in the chat. The first one was, can you share examples where gender-blind environmental policies have unintentionally harmed or excluded women?
Yes, I can share some examples if I may. To start with energy sector, we had some examples within the survey that some clients refused service from female technicians. For example, we had this example in Tegeta when they support women technicians to be employed in this sector. And also, we had examples where employers in the energy sector report lack of women's facilities. For example, no changing rooms for women, because it was said that only men would use this room. And if we go to climate education, educators say that students have no idea what is green job. Like they know it, but they can't explain it, and they can't see the links of their skills and what is the demand on the market. Also, I can add the example from rural development and agricultural projects that, as I mentioned in my presentation, most rural women do not own land, and they lack formal recognition as farmers. So when it comes to green subsidies, training, innovative grants, they don't have access to it because they own nothing. They own no land, no formal registration, no access to credit, and this is a huge challenge for women living in rural areas.
Sorry, Anna, you're breaking up a little bit, your voice.
Sorry.
Okay.
Do you hear me now?
A bit.
Do you hear me now?
I mean, I can understand you a little bit, but just if
Okay.
you, yeah, let you know. Yeah.
I can write in the chat if it's not stable.
No, but understood. There's a lot of maybe unintended harm for these policies that are.
I just wanted to add example from transportation, because women rely more on public transport, especially when they travel with children, and they need better safety lighting, for example, in rural areas. And urban design decisions are not made with gender analysis or gender lens, and it means that women are excluded from this process. That's all.
Thank you. Let's just take this one more. Arakli, do you want to come on before we go into closing remarks to maybe address your comment here? Arakli? I don't know if you can hear me, but he basically said the development of a green circular economy is promising not only on the basis of plastic and other waste, but also construction waste. The existence of their management centers, urbanization, construction industries are growing by recycling waste generated in this area. Many construction products can be produced, which will be available to meet the needs of both cities and rural populations. In this regard, there are intellectual works in scientific circles, universities, and there's perspective for their approval, which requires test experimental support. Local self-government, central governments, universities, business, industries can work in this regard by combining competencies. It will be interesting to get acquainted with good practice in this direction in the future. And if anyone has any reactions to that, or Arakli, if you want to come off the mic and say more. No.
დიდი მადლობა ჩართვისთვის, მინდა მეც გამოვხატო ჩემი პოზიცია. მოგესალმებით, ძალიან კარგი ფორმატია ეს შეხვედრის. დიდი მადლობა ყველა პრეზენტატორს საინტერესო ინფორმაციის მოწოდებისათვის. უბრალოდ მინდა ყურადღება დაუთმო
information. I just want to I would like to ask you to present more good practices during next meetings, because it's very useful for us, for self-governments, because we need to inspire our population, because there are huge resources in green economy, not just plastic. For example, construction waste, and we know that these processes are very important in all cities. Regrettably, in villages we have less people, because people try to move from villages to cities for breadwinning or for job finding processes. So this increases population of cities, and this means more construction waste, because more houses are necessary, and this requires more analyzed cycle management. If we speak about plastic separation, for example, and change of mindset, also huge resources required for processing construction waste, because it could be used as raw material for other products. And in this process, women with their creativity can do a lot. They can establish new startups, and they can develop businesses, and So we would love to share best practices in this regard, how developed and civilized world dealt with these processes, because we also want to start interventions. Kutaisi has really good examples of separation, composting, and so on and so on. And we were highly helped by UNDP and EU. So within that grant, we managed to make this real example as steps on renewable energy and so on. So we would love to share more best practices, because this is a very serious topic and we want to propose more and more inspirations. We want to attract businesses, because we have state programs which allocate particular grants for specific grants for innovative ideas, and this of course promotes people to change mindset, to think in somehow newly, and this is really also good opportunity for self-employment. So we expect that we will be able to share more best practices and examples. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Concrete examples, and I'm glad to hear that this is a serious issue for you, and I am sure we can come back to you and support you on that. Thank you guys for sticking with it. It's been such an interesting conversation. We can go on for another hour, I'm sure, but we want to quickly wrap up. I really want to thank our speakers, Andrew, Nato, and Anna, and Sidi, who had to drop off. This was a very, very stimulating conversation. Thank you for your time. I know that we're all like super busy, but given us a lot of food for thought. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Ilaria Mariotti, who is with the Mayors for Economic Growth and Gender team for the wrap up and closing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tiffany, and thank you very much to Andrew, to Nato, to Anna, and to Sidi for the insightful reflections and experience and sharing of experiences, as well, and also to all the participants for sharing some interesting questions and reflections. I think if there's one thing that today's discussion has made clear, is that putting women at the heart of the green economy is not just the fair thing to do, but also the smart thing to do. And I think that CD highlighted this very well. When women have access to green jobs, to leadership roles, and to opportunities to innovate, we all benefit from more creative solutions, and also for stronger and more sustainable growth. We've seen that gender responsive and inclusive approaches, and when I mean inclusive, I mean also building on the involvement and the collaboration from people from rural and urban areas, and also the involvement and the collaboration between a variety of stakeholders, including academia, vocational and vocational institutions, government institutions, the startup and the businesses ecosystem, and also citizens. These are essential for unlocking untapped potential, and also ensuring that the transition to a greener economy benefits from all these different perspectives. I think also, and it has been shared also by Anna, that closing gender gaps means not just having more jobs, but better jobs, and also more innovation, and that having a future, going towards a future that reflects the needs and the talents of everyone in our communities. My closing for today is I would like to see this energy keep going as we move forward. As Tico has mentioned at the beginning, as the Mayors for Economic Growth initiatives adds into its third phase, I really encourage everyone, each and every one of you, to stay connected and engaged. We'll be exploring these issues even further together, and your voices and ideas are really important for us. So thank you again for your commitment, and I wish everyone a good rest of the week and a good weekend. Thank you.